to the thing.
We
Like I didn't
are
have to.
live.
Oh, hi, everyone. Welcome. Hello. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad at getting this ready. Uh, we are so excited to see you here. Britt is joining me for our October Astro chat, Q&A, catch up. Welcome, Britt. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here.
We have so much to talk about because there is so much going on. We are recording this around the middle of October, so it's the 17th. We were able to post it into the community chat here on YouTube. So hopefully you had a little bit of heads up that we were going to be here today. So if you are joining us live and you have any questions, you are most welcome to post them into the chat. Even though we've been doing this for a few months now, I still feel like every time we come in and it starts, I'm just like, where is everything again? So I don't have the best Mercury. So sometimes it takes me a minute. Okay, Brett. So you mentioned when we were doing our pre-show chat, you mentioned a couple of really juicy things as we look at like second half of October. Where do you want to start? Or is there something particularly on your mind that you are looking at, I guess?
Well, maybe it's good to set the stage that we are now firmly out of eclipse season.
Yes,
I think it's a worth an applause for all of us for making it through, and
that's true.
that it was quite a ride, I would say. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about Venus finally being in Libra and being in pretty decent shape. Not making any aspect to Mars currently or Saturn for that matter, and being still visible. I mean, it's
Yes.
it's it's pretty good as far as Venus transits go. So I'm personally loving it.
Totally. I mean, I know if people are listening to my podcast, I did an episode on Venus in Libra, but for all the things you said, Brett, obviously Venus is in Libra every year, but it's different depending on like who is Venus aspecting, or is she morning star or evening star? And I think by almost every measure, Venus in Libra 2025 is the more functional or effective version of Venus. Like it is morning star Venus, no aspect to Mars in Scorpio or Saturn in Pisces. So no interference from Mars and Saturn, but a huge amount of help and support from Jupiter and Cancer. And one of the things I realized when I was doing a deep dive on obsessing over, like, this is just a lovely balm of a transit or a
Mm.
cycle that we have, second half of October, first week of November. It's like, it doesn't mean everything everywhere in life is great or the world, of course, but there is this little sweet bit that is like providing
Mm.
relief or a place that you can go to where you can catch your breath or even experience some ease or enjoyment. And I really want to encourage everybody to do that, especially around the topics of the Libra part of your chart and life, because that's where Venus is really like working to improve things. And the reason I want to encourage you to really enjoy that this year in 2025 is that for the next couple of years, when Venus is in Libra, we will have Saturn in Aries. And
Mhm.
so we will have Venus in Libra, but dealing with some obstacles that Saturn in Aries might be kicking up. But we don't have that in 2025. So that's one of the reasons I'm totally with you, Britt,
Yeah.
on let's enjoy this how we can,
Yeah.
while we can.
Yeah, it feels really sweet. And of course, Venus in Libra is so perfect for really like reconnecting with your social group, your friends, having that nice special
Yes.
time together, that intimate time that is, very different in quality to Venus in Taurus, Venus other domicile, but still like so nice to have that sweetness and that balm, like you said.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I think about with Venus in Libra a lot as well, which is friendship. I
Mm.
know students will often think of Libra as like relationships or Venus as love, and those two things are not inaccurate, but there's something very social and very like encouraging about interaction and just general connectedness.
Mm.
Venus in Libra is like, yes, we just had a chat to the barista in the coffee shop, or I met this new person and we're going to have, a follow-up catch up, or I've just had this really, and this literally happened to me last night. We had like a bonus girls' night where some of the girls in my girlfriend group got together. One girlfriend was like, I just want to celebrate this one thing that I've come through. And whoever could join just said, let's go. And it was like this random Thursday night that we just went out for, a drink and a snack, nothing extravagant or extreme, but it was just that extra bit of, and all of us, on the group WhatsApp chat this morning of, that was so nice. I love it when we have extra time together. It was just really pleasant. And that idea, I think Venus in Libra, we can certainly use to help with repair or reconnection if
Yeah.
there's been some disconnect, with a loved one or a friend or a family member. But we can also use it just to enjoy the good life with people whose company we genuinely have fun with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like also Venus is so key to this part of the month because next week's new moon is of course ruled by
Yeah.
Venus in Libra, and then the full moon in Taurus that's in early November is also ruled by that Venus in Libra. So she's playing also a key role in these lunations that we have coming up. And it's nice that they are a bit less complicated than some of the lunations can get.
So good. That's such a good point, Britt. Yeah. Our next two lunations, including the Libra new moon on October 21st and then the Taurus full moon on November 5th, they're both ruled by Venus in Libra. So we have lots of opportunities to really draw down this Venus in
Mm.
Libra energy. Why don't we talk a little bit about the new moon in Libra, which is coming up on the 21st? It's at 28 Libra. So the new moon will happen at the tail end of Libra. But of course, as it happens, Venus will be in early Libra. So this to me is just like a real concentration or extra
Hmm.
emphasis, on whatever Venus is already working on your behalf around in terms of the topics of the Libra part of
Mm.
your chart. This is a really beautiful like reset point.
Yeah.
But what are you thinking, Britt, around that new moon on the 21st?
Yeah, I agree, and I love also that the fact that the moon is just coming off of that square of Jupiter, so there's like some some sweetness and maybe some growing pains that come with like the reconnection. That is also a beautiful way to view relationships. That it's like the pulse of coming together and coming apart and all of that kind of like expansion and contraction that's so necessary and so natural and so key in relationships. Yeah, it really forms like a great reset point for these kinds of patterns to get restarted and reset.
That's a beautiful way of describing it. Yeah, that idea of like the moon is going into the new moon, and just before it does, it has this square to Jupiter. And so it brings some of that hope. But I loved what you said too, Britt, about the growing pains.
Mm.
And I know you're raising a child who's a little younger, and anyone
Hmm.
who's raised, toddlers or young kids, there is this sort of almost erratic quality to their growth spurts. They'll kind of level off for a period of time, and then there's this like accelerated period of like
Yeah.
brain development or skill accumulation, and all the routines go haywire for a bit. But when we come through that, the young child is capable of so much more than they were before. And that idea of growing pains, the reason I really like was really sparked with that is, Venus, the ruler of the new moon, because she's in a place in the sky where a number of other planets don't aspect her right now. The next aspect that Venus herself will make is that square to Jupiter. And so I
Hmm.
do think there's so much of that idea when we have a square of Jupiter, it's the growth and the expansion, but some of the jerky adjustment that happens along the
Right.
way, that we
Yeah.
can be growing and moving towards something we really want and still having maybe a little bit of friction, or that idea of, yeah, I want to grow there, but that means I've got to leave something behind, and some of those like
Hmm.
important choices to facilitate the growth, if you like.
Yeah, there's like a bit of a bittersweet quality to it, right? It's like you wanna get to a certain point and you wanna make progress and you wanna move forward, but there's also something you have to leave behind and yeah, it's really it's a beautiful process.
Oh my gosh, even as you're saying that, I must have babies on the mind at the moment because two of my two of my sisters both had babies at basically the same time almost a year ago. So
Mm.
we've got these two little cousins that will grow up in the family that are only a couple of weeks apart. And they're at the stage now where they're both crawling, and it's
Oh,
so cute to see. And both of my sisters, just reminding me as they're, going through their journey in with motherhood, you know, that early newborn phase, it's so intense
yeah.
and you're excited for your baby to learn new skills, but then you never have that sweetness of that newborn kind of, with the
Mm,
smell of the milk on the head. And so, like what you're saying, Britt, the bittersweet of this has been a really sweet season or stage of life. It doesn't have to be about raising young babies. It's not for me and it's not going to be for other people. But, this was a really sweet season and I enjoyed it. But we are moving beyond it. We're going into what's next and we have to leave something behind. That idea when they sort the clothes and the 3-month clothes go away and
mm.
the 6-month clothes go out, and something's on that sort of symbolic level for all of us of, yeah, that was what was, but we're going to what's next.
Yeah, what comes up for me is that saying that you never step into the same river twice, right? It's like
Beautiful.
it's Venus speaking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but also the Jupiter in Cancer, like the river,
Yeah,
although it's
yeah,
beautiful
for sure.
poetry and like it's on all
Mm,
levels. Yeah.
yeah,
You never step into the same river twice. The river's always changing and you're always changing. So
yep.
maybe we could talk, maybe a way of summarizing this is like the new moon in Libra does have these undertones of the growing pains or the expansion or the taking things to a new place or a new level, and it doesn't have to be like, oh my God, winning and success at everything, because I don't think Jupiter and Cancer is quite
Mm,
about that. I think
mm-mm,
it's more like softening into what is more nourishing or what is more
mm.
sustainable. And so even though we say it is about expanding and growing, it might be really gentle and it might be about leaving things behind rather than, building or winning kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so good. Softening into change. I think it's so good. I love that. I
Yeah.
feel like we can all just sit with that and just feel what that's like. Just that
Yeah.
release. Mm,
That sort of soften into it.
mm.
And then we'll go and have a snack and lie down. That's like
Yes.
to make it easy.
I think that
Um,
sounds great. We all deserve that, I feel.
yeah. And then of course there's still always more other things. But that
Yeah.
is a lovely little, maybe a little pocket of peace or a pocket of like pleasure or some
Mm,
ease for sure.
mm.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to have that snack before Mercury and Mars. Well,
Yeah.
simultaneously it's happening more or less. Mercury
Yeah.
and
So,
Mars connect together in Scorpio.
yeah, what do you want to say about Mercury and Mars?
Yeah, that's happening on the 20th, right? So that's just
Yeah.
a day before the new moon. And
Yes.
it's happening. It's still within orb as the new moon is happening. So yeah, this is a very different energy. Of course, Mercury and Mars together is like explosive words or expressive conversations that can sometimes lead towards conflict or working things out, right? It's happening in Scorpio, so there's maybe also an element of things really bubbling up to the surface that have been just simmering there for a while and yeah, really saying what you mean and saying it maybe in a way sometimes that can be a bit abrasive, right? Thinking of the cutting edge that Mars lends to Mercury in this position, especially a dignified Mars. So to balance out the sweetness, there's some spice.
Yes, the Mercury Mars is a lot of spice,
Mm,
definitely. There is so much like strategy and there's secrecy and there's sort of plans that you're mulling over in private or a deal that you might be making with one person but you're not telling other people about it. I think about Mercury Mars and I think about it as being decisive and being bold. We're going to have a lot of Mercury Mars energy over the next few months in various iterations. And this particular Mercury Mars in Scorpio to me feels very private and internal, that sort of quiet energy, that non-verbal of a Mercury Mars in a water sign.
the
But
brooding,
nonetheless, sorry?
the brooding
The
comes up for me.
brooding, exactly.
Mm,
And like the brooding and then the plotting and planning that comes
hmm.
from that. And so it almost feels to me like making decisions in secret or behind closed doors. And
Yeah.
in the days and weeks after Mercury and Mars are conjunct, so in the days and weeks after October 20th, it's like slowly things are revealed piece by piece.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like with Scorpio, I'm often thinking of like a sniper attack, like just waiting for the right time to go for it and then watch out.
Yes, exactly. So that's yeah, that sense of like biding your time, not rushing, knowing very clearly what you want to do, but being patient to pick the most effective moment, I guess.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are two big energies, October 20th, October 21st. And then the other piece, which is like definitely taking a step back a little bit, but I think a lot about how on the 22nd, Neptune will return to Pisces, October 22nd. And then in early November, around the 7th or 8th, Uranus will return to Taurus.
Mm.
And it's not so, I mean, there's definitely a mood shift that is like going to be apparent in the collective, I think, with each of these changes. And also this idea of two outer planets returning to places where they were earlier in the year. It feels like a callback to maybe unfinished business from early 2025, first half of 2025, maybe even the tail end of 2024. And there may be some collective elements there, but I certainly think personally it's a little reminder that as much as there's been a lot of breaking open of new ground through this middle part of
Hmm.
2025, there may be some things that need completing or wrapping up before we can go forward. But how are you kind of thinking about those pieces, Britt? Are you thinking about them together or separately, or what kind of ideas come to you for that?
Yeah, they happen so close together, right? So it feels to me like it's really about shifting gears and shifting back, right? Both
Mm.
Neptune in Aries and Uranus in Gemini are quite active, full of energy, full of this forward momentum. And then now we're shifting back into the yin, the feminine signs again, where there's maybe more pause for reflection. Like, what do I actually want to take with me before I move forward?
Mm,
It's the
yeah.
the sacred pause of wait a second before I dive into something new and just, keep going with whatever feels alive and urgent right now, right? The Neptune and Aries urgency, and of course Uranus and Gemini has no has no shortage of that either. It's a good moment to just pause and take stock of what maybe you've left behind and haven't fully processed or haven't fully moved on from yet, and then taking the time to to wrap that up or see what's still lingering there.
That's a really beautiful point. The idea of like being really thoughtful or intentional about what do I want to bring forward with me? And is that some physical stuff, or is this a trait or an emotional
Mm.
quality? And, when you're thinking about what you want to bring forward with you, sometimes that also reveals what it is you're willing to leave behind.
Yeah.
And I think that like this transition period, like as we head into November, December 25, and then January, February of 26, those questions that you've brought forward, Britt, I think they're very rich for that particular time period. Because it's, once we get to February, March of 26, we have Neptune back in Aries. I can't remember exactly when Uranus comes back into Gemini.
Yeah, good
We'll
question. April, I
we'll
believe. I was
It's
looking at
April.
it for
Okay.
personal reasons.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. So, by the time we get to that northern spring period in 2026, we really are in the okay, we're going forward now. And so the time,
Yes.
like the bridge and the transition from now until then is what needs to come, what needs to stay. And
Hmm.
all under
Yeah.
yeah, what were you going to say?
Well, it's interesting that it also happens to coincide with like the winter time in the northern hemisphere, right? So there is
Yeah.
like this natural seasonal kind of going inward, and I think that matches these outer planets moving back into more yin signs, and then
Yeah.
come spring, we're like, it's go time, and it's good to prepare for that because
Yes.
once Uranus and Neptune pick up the pace, and we get, of course, the Saturn Neptune activation with Saturn also going back into Aries at some point, there is a lot of movement again, and I think it's really good to prep for that and to really take stock of that, what it is that you need in order to make that leap.
That's
and
a
build the
yeah.
resource in yourself, I think is a good one for Uranus and Taurus as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what you're also getting at is the pacing of, Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Aries. These are hot signs. They're quicker moving. They're more forward in their orientation. Whereas Pisces and Taurus are cool signs. One's wet and one's dry, but cool signs which have more inward orientation. They're slower in their nature. And so that idea of really maybe even using the seasonal cues, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, of slowing, reflecting, pausing, and even the idea of maybe replenishing or recharging physically, emotionally, psychologically, energetically on whatever levels are most relevant for you. Because I love what you're pointing to, Britt, is that, February for Neptune back in Aries, April for Uranus back in Gemini, then it's happening really quickly. It's like,
Hmm.
we're off and running. And at that point, there won't be as much space or capacity for that intentionality. And so at
Yes,
least taking the time to ready yourself will give you a good start, if you like.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
building that capacity also for change and that
Yeah.
tolerance for it because it's gonna happen.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That sense of, if we're going to have further periods of fast-paced change, what will support, me, if you're each thinking about this question individually, what will help support me as I navigate that? And are there
Mhm.
resources that I might have that I want to share with my community that will help support those around me as well? So
Yeah, that's
that's,
great. That's
yeah.
great Jupiter in Cancer medicine as well. So nice full
Yes.
circle.
Yes, right back to Jupiter in Cancer. And speaking of Jupiter in Cancer, we should maybe just talk very briefly about the full moon in Taurus on November 5. I can see we've got a couple of questions coming through, so we're going to get to those very quickly. Do you want to start on the full moon in Taurus, Britt? Is there anything?
Let me pull it up briefly. So
Okay.
maybe you can get us started and
Yes,
I
I
can
can. So the full moon is it's at 13 Taurus, so it's right in the middle of Taurus. And there are a couple of things that, like, maybe two things that I really want to say about this. The middle of Taurus, like the middle of all the fixed signs, corresponds to the cross quarter festivals in the Celtic Wheel of the Year.
hmm.
And the middle of Taurus is like when the sun is in the middle of Taurus, we have the May Day Beltane type celebration, which has its origins in really celebrating growth and fertility and the energy of spring. The idea that we're in the thick of a season of growth and kind of heightened, accumulation or abundance or creation. And so that energy is kind of part of this full moon in Taurus, which to me is very favorable. I mean, it's a full moon in Taurus. So this is one of my favorite full moons every year,
Hmm.
essentially, because it's the moon in her exalted place. There's this grounding, embodied quality, and it's a reminder to enjoy what you have already worked for, even as you are continuing to build, systems or routines that will continue to support your growth. But it's more about the idea of growing and building on a measured, manageable timeline rather than the frantic sort of hustle. And the moon is around 13 Taurus, but the next aspect that the moon makes, the full moon doesn't have any aspects from Mars in the mix, which is great. And the next kind of planet that the moon goes to is Jupiter. So the full moon is applying to this sextile with Jupiter in its exalted place. And that feels very nourishing. It feels very
Hmm.
replenishing. We were just talking about the Jupiter in Cancer and the community connections and community
Hmm.
care. And that's what reminded me to think about this. So there's a couple of little thoughts that I've had about the full moon in Taurus. But Britt, yeah, if you've got the chart there or you want to say something,
Hmm.
love to hear your take as well.
Yeah, no, it looks very supportive. And again, it has that Venus in Libra, of course, as rulership, though there's not a direct aspect forming between Venus and the moon in Taurus. So that's a bit less supportive. But I really do love that sextile that the moon is making. And yeah, as you're saying, like a nice a juicy full moon in Taurus, what's not to love? In this case, I think we're in for a little treat.
A little treat. And as you said, yeah, the ruler of the full moon, Venus in Libra, not making an aspect, but still, in the moments that Venus in Libra thinks about it, whatever she sends to the full moon just adds in to the goodness there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really nice. I'm like, there's going to be some bumps over the next
Hmm.
couple of weeks, but I wanted to make sure we got some of the good stuff in there. So let's take some questions. Let's see. Do you want to call them out, Britt, or do you want me to?
Yeah, yeah, no
Yeah.
worries.
Okay.
I think the first question is from Debbie. I've just had a fallout with a close friend. Could be Mars Mercury conjunction. Question, my Mercury is in Cancer. Could it be my friend with her Mars square my Mercury makes me too sensitive?
Okay.
So
So
this is about synastry again, like the
yeah,
yeah.
that sort of connection. So first of all, maybe because I also have my Mercury in a water sign, I would like to reject the definition of being too sensitive on your behalf, Debbie, and for all of us with Mercury in a water sign. Yes, there is definitely a sensitivity or an emotional awareness where communication is concerned, but part of the reason that I'm like responding in this way initially is the definition of something being too much, or is it too sensitive or not sensitive enough, it's very subjective. One
Mm,
person's too sensitive is another person's not emotional enough, and that's where it's relative, essentially, I guess, is what I'm saying there. So, to the first part of your question, Debbie, yeah, Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, this is kind of direct. It's a bit assertive. And so it can be more blunt than, anyone might typically be. It's just a particularly blunt combination between Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, in a Mars ruled sign. And Debbie, with your Mercury in Cancer, there's definitely an intuitive component to thinking and talking for you. Your Mercury is in a sign ruled by the moon. And there may be a piece where sometimes, and this is common for, many placements in water signs, but particularly Mercury there, you know, to whom do you feel comfortable to talk about your feelings? And who do you feel safe to share the truth of your feelings with? And so one of the catches here with Mercury and Cancer can be something about, well, I felt that, but I didn't feel safe to say it. And then that has been like a thing that maybe is lingering. This may or may not be relevant to your specific situation, Debbie, but I'm just thinking about Mercury and Cancer in general. And so you're saying your friend has her Mars square your Mercury. So if your Mercury is in Cancer, your friend's Mars would either be in Aries or in Libra. And that is a tricky type of synastry aspect to have for sure. The Mercury square Mars, it denotes a little bit of friction or a little bit of heat around communication or planning or just generally talking things through. And I guess, I'm curious, like, have you been friends for a long time? How have you navigated that Mercury square Mars in the past? But of course, as we were just talking earlier, we do have Jupiter in Cancer right now, which perhaps may be activating your Mercury in Cancer and then by square to your friend's Mars in its place. And it may be that there's been some underlying low level friction with this Mercury square Mars aspect that might be bigger than usual with
mm,
that Jupiter transit. So there's a few things. So I don't feel like it's you being too sensitive, but maybe there are things that are being said or that are coming out in the open right now that have been held onto or not been so directly discussed in the past. Britt, how would you think about this? Like with this idea of Mercury square Mars, from
mm.
one chart to another, which is a synastry technique that we use for relationship therapy.
Yeah, I like I appreciate the point about not being too sensitive, and I think it's, good to also ask yourself if you feel that like is that the case for you, or do you feel that other people experience you as too sensitive? Because it's again, it's all relative. And if it's something that you struggle with, because I can imagine like the sensitivity of just getting a lot of feelings in your mind, that's maybe something that, especially with the Jupiter activation, potentially gets further activated and triggered. And then about the synastry, I do want to note, because we don't know where the Mars is, the friend's Mars, that it's also going to be a very different experience, whether that's a Mars in domicile or whether that's a Mars in detriment. And I can imagine that that dynamic also, yeah, gets further amplified and gets a bit more of a push from like a Mars in Aries, where it's like really like thinking of Mercury and Cancer being so good at listening and so good at reflecting back. I can imagine a Mars and
Mm.
Aries person could be like, just say what you mean, say what you're actually, what you want, just, you
Be
know?
so direct.
Whereas the Mars in Libra would complicate that a bit more, right? It's like it's less clear maybe. So I can imagine that all of that also really has an impact. And I think Debbie is just commenting. One friend has Mars in Aries, the other has Mars in Libra. So it's both.
Oh my gosh, so you've got the whole the whole mix there.
Yeah.
Um, oh my goodness. Okay. One friend, okay. One friend has in both 2 degrees, so very early. Okay. And then if they're 2 degrees, like super early, Neptune has been aspecting planets at the early degrees of
Mm.
all the cardinal signs. So if it's two Aries, two Cancer, two Libra, two Capricorn, we had Neptune come through that part of the sky and Saturn got very close to it. So and what we're talking about here, this is a quite an intermediate technique that we're referring to. So the synastry thing that Britt and I have talked about is when we look at an aspect from a planet in one person's chart to an aspect in another person's chart. And whatever degrees those aspects are happening at, they become like hotspot degrees or really active degrees for that particular connection. So whether it's a friendship, a love relationship, a family relationship, any connection between two people. And then when we have like transits to those degrees, we know that the dynamic between the two people is going to change. Whatever pattern has worked up till now, it's shifting and evolving. It doesn't always mean we have a fallout and we're not friends anymore, but it certainly means we can't go forward together in the ways that we have gone on in the past.
Hmm.
So, yeah, these are beautiful like things to think about. And yeah, I think Debbie has put some good comments in here. So, and she did say they'd been friends for some years. So it's been a longer term friendship. Yeah,
Yeah.
such a rich question. So much. Okay. I think there might be one other question we could take a look at, Britt. What do you think?
I love this question from the OK channel.
Yep.
As the year ends with a lot of flowy, watery energy, how do I stay intentional while also letting the flow take me where I need to go?
That is so beautiful. Um, there's a lot of trust, I think, in answering
Mm.
your question. Uh, when we're in that space of water and flow, we are in a non-articulate, kind of non-intellectual, non-verbal place. The water placements are, and particularly in late October, we have a lot of planets, late Scorpio, late Pisces. So we do have this real sense of flow, of things maybe coming together or standing out. And so part of it is feeling the mood and seeing how willing you are to release into it. That's kind of my first instinctive response. What about you, Brett?
Yeah, I love that. I think it's yeah, so much about water, it just makes a way, right? It just moves and it's a very watching water move, it's slow, but it goes in a certain direction and it does chip away and release like elements with it. Maybe this is very poetic and vague, but bear with me. It's like water takes by just flowing, right? And I think there's just
Yes.
something about really letting that process happen, not trying to dip buckets of stuff into the sand and just um trusting that the water will take you where it needs to go. And I
Yeah.
think there's an invitation to really feel and maybe even play around with water as your as we're ending this year of like,
Yeah.
okay, what is it like to be in running water? What is it like to feel like the water moving on my body and it washing away dirt
Mm,
and stuff that I've been carrying without me having to force that to happen. It just does that
mm,
naturally. And I think there's something really beautiful about that as an exploration that helps you dip into that in a way that is not heady. And I think that's, in general my take on astrology from a somatic perspective, but I think especially given the element of water, it's like okay, just getting out of the head and just feeling the water on your skin. It's a good lesson.
that's so beautiful because it is very almost evocative. And as you were describing that, Britt, my parents visited a couple of weeks ago and we went to a place in Ontario called Tobermory, where there, and we went on a boat. So we're on the water and we went to a place called Flowerpot Island where there are these very interesting like stone structures that have come about over very long periods of time where the water has eroded away some of the stone and the soil material, and the harder stone has kind of, created these very unique features. And I was thinking about that as you were talking about how if you just let the water run its course, the change does happen and it may be slower than you want. That's sometimes the trickiest thing with planets in water signs is that, water is a very powerful force. And we see this in nature where just a steady drip or a very trickle, like a light flow of water that is consistent or persistent over time, it can wear a groove. In Australia, we get the
Mm-hmm.
grooves in the sandstone, but it can certainly wear a groove in the rock. And so that even though the earth feels so solid, with that persistence and patience over time, the water kind of finds a way. And so I think when you're talking about the shower and like just letting it wash away, like the dirt or whatever, water will kind of find a way, and it needs maybe less forcing or pushing than we
Mm-hmm.
realize. But what it requires from us is a little bit of patience and a sense of intentionality. That word has been something I've come to a lot as we've got further into like Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, particularly. What am I going to be intentional about? And then allow to kind of find its way. So it's sort of like setting the intention without being too micromanaging about how it comes about. And so something about all of those themes seems really relevant here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what that brings up for me as well is, water will run its course and find its way. And if that's too much or if it's too free, then water just needs some containment. And that is something that you can do. Like the water will run, but if there's a certain part of your life that feels like it needs a wash or a cleanse, then
Mm.
set that container for yourself. I mean, Saturn in Pisces brings this up for me. Um,
Yes.
Water needs to be held
Yeah.
sometimes. And
Yes.
um, if you don't want a tsunami or like
A
a
flood.
wave that's overflowing a flood, then find a way to build those containers. Also knowing that sometimes water cannot be contained and it does overflow. But there's kind of like one of the things that I love to do with my son, who's nearly 4, is like we go to the water pump and we build dams. And then
Mm.
there's an element when sometimes you can just remove the dam and see what that does
Yes.
to the water, or then build new containment, right? There's so much play that you can do there that's really good stuff, both if you have a child and if you're just in your life trying to manage the water. I mean, I live in the Netherlands where we do need to manage the water a lot, and there's
Yeah, you
lots of
don't want the
lessons.
riverbanks to overflow.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's so beautiful, the water play with kids. My eldest nephew or niece is 10, and so I have more nephews than nieces. And at this point, I feel like I've spent a decade periodically doing water play with young kids because kids love to play with water. And all of that idea of the flow of the water and redirecting it or damming it up and then the whoosh, I think these are great elements for adults to
Mm-hmm.
reconnect with. If you've
Yes.
never been in the garden with a hose or dealt with, water that's kind of going somewhere that maybe you don't want, it's just a good remember of that elemental quality of this, so necessary element that we all need.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. Like speaking as a mother who doesn't really enjoy all the stuff that my son does, right? Or that he likes to do.
Yes.
There's like adult stuff and there's kid stuff, and sometimes that's a very strict boundary.
Separate.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
like two worlds, but when it comes to water play, I'm down. It's fun. It's really
You're
good
like,
for
I'm
my
happy to
inner
do
child.
this with
Yeah.
you. Yes.
Yes.
So that's what
Yeah.
we recommend for everyone with the water influences, Neptune coming back into Pisces, which does happen on the 22nd of October. So there is plenty of time for
Hmm.
water activities. And with Neptune in late Pisces, Saturn in late Pisces, Jupiter towards the end of Cancer, as all the planets go through the end of Scorpio, we have lots of aspects that are trines from Scorpio to Pisces, really from now until whenever Sag season starts. So the first 3 weeks of November, this is going on. So, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful chat today, Britt. And thank you all for joining us with your lovely comments and questions. Britt, let us know how people can find out more about you and your work with astrology, because I know you see clients, and let us know, where do we get more of you?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. You can find my work on somaticastrology.co. I do birth chart consultations, I do somatic coaching, and it's all from an experiential somatic perspective. So, what I like to do in sessions is to really invite in the felt sense and the experience of connecting to your birth chart on an embodied level. So, if that's something that you're interested in exploring, then come see me at somaticastrology.co.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Britt. And for any of you who are interested in more of my work, kellysastrology.com is my website. We have just opened registration for my Plan Your Year Ahead 2026 course, which starts on November 10th. So if you would like some timing techniques to help you plan for the year ahead for 2026, come and join us. You'll be learning the technique of perfections, which helps you identify important themes and topics for you and your chart personally in the year ahead. You will also create your own monthly calendar based on your birth chart. And of course, we will share lots of insights about the big transits and timing trends for 2026 so you can see how they may be affecting your chart and life. So, all the details for that Plan Your Year Ahead 2026 course are over at kellysastrology.com. And if you do decide to join us, it is a live training. So there are 4 live classes starting November 10. And you will also see Britt there because she will be one of the teaching assistants joining me to help share this really rich and fun and very applicable timing material. So we will see many of you here on YouTube, in a few weeks. But if you do want to join us in class, that will probably start before we're here again. So Britt, just give a quick shout out to your website again.
Somaticastrology.co.
.co, that's right.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone, thank you for joining us. Britt's details will also be in the show notes along with mine. So if you didn't catch any of those, the links will be there. We so appreciate you joining us. If you are enjoying our live Q&As each month, make sure to follow, like, subscribe, hit that bell on my YouTube channel so you will get notifications when we are here. Otherwise, we wish you all the best. Enjoy Venus and Libra as much as you can, and we will see you next time.
See
Thanks
you
again.
next